Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're taking a closer look at the Sons of Silence Motorcycle Club.
Right, the SOSMC.
Yeah, and we've pulled together quite a bit of material, news articles, government docs, even some academic stuff.
We're really trying to get past the usual stereotypes and understand what this group is actually about.
Exactly. So our mission here, for you listening, is to piece together a clear picture from these sources, origins, how they're set up, their impact, without getting totally lost in the weeds.
Let's give it a shot. Where do we start?
Okay, origins, 1966. Newote, Colorado.
Right near Boulder.
That's where it kicks off. Founded by Bruce Gale Richardson, known as the Dude.
Huh, the dude. Okay.
And he was a Navy veteran and served 58 to 60. Seems like that military connection pops up a lot with these clubs, doesn't it?
It really does. You see that structure, that sense of brotherhood. Maybe it carries over. And interestingly, they didn't stay headquartered in Nawote for long.
No. Where'd they go?
Moved down to Colorado Springs fairly early on,
Mm-hmm.
which, suggests they were thinking about a more central, maybe strategic base pretty
Yeah.
quickly.
Oh, okay. And Richardson wasn't the only key figure, right? There was another Navy vet.
Yeah, Leonard Lloyd Reed Jr., uh, Jr. He served 65 to 69, became national president in 77.
And stayed for how long?
22 years, a really long time. That kind of leadership definitely shapes a group,
Absolutely. Provides stability, I guess.
for sure. And Reed was involved in more than just internal club stuff. He helped set up the Colorado Confederation of Clubs,
What was that about?
trying to improve communication between the different clubs in Colorado,
Hmm.
sort of managing the landscape, you could say, strategic thinking.
Interesting. So he had influence beyond just the Sons of Silence?
Seems like it, and apparently he was well respected. When he died in 2003, there's this huge motorcycle procession for his funeral. Shut down I-25 near Denver, apparently.
Wow. Okay, that definitely says something.
It does. So thinking bigger picture now, how big are they? Where do they operate?
Well, they're international, mostly U.S., obviously, but chapters in Germany, too.
Germany.
Yeah. Across the U.S., maybe 12 states, total of about 35 chapters overall.
And member numbers, what are the estimates?
Sources say somewhere between like 250 and 500 members.
Okay, so not huge compared to some, but significant.
Right. Puts them sixth largest worldwide, roughly.
Mhm.
After the big names everyone knows, Hells Angels, Banditos, Outlaws.
Pagans, Mongols.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're in that top tier, just below the very largest.
And it's probably important to mention the U.S. Department of Justice officially calls them a criminal organization.
Right, that's a key designation from law enforcement's perspective.
So how do you get in if you wanted to join? I mean,
Well, first off, you got to be at least 21,
okay.
and you need to own a specific type of bike, either a Harley Davidson or an Indian.
Very specific. No metric bikes allowed, huh?
Seems that way. It's about that classic American V-twin image, I suppose. Tradition.
And then there are the pledges, right? Loyalty, secrecy.
Absolutely fundamental. That internal bond, that code of silence,
Yeah.
it's central to how these clubs operate. Makes them tough to investigate.
And within the club, how's it run?
Each chapter kind of governs itself. You've got the usual structure: president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, sergeant at arms.
Standard stuff for organizations like this.
Pretty much. Gives them local control, but within the overall club rules.
Okay, let's talk visuals. The patch, the colors. What's their main symbol?
It's an American eagle, right, laid over a big letter A.
Yeah, and apparently the inspiration came from the Anheuser-Busch logo.
Get out of here. Really?
The beer logo.
That's what the sources say. Kind of surprising, isn't it?
It really is. Huh, okay. And that goes on the back of the jacket, the cutoff vest.
Right, the colors. And they also wear the 1% patch.
Ah, yes, the 1%er patch. That's a deliberate statement, isn't it? Setting themselves apart from mainstream motorcyclists.
Saying we're the outlaws. And sometimes you see the Totenkopf too.
The skull imagery, yeah. German for death's head. Adds to that tough, intimidating look. And their motto.
It's in Latin. Donec mors non separat.
Which means?
Until death separates us.
Wow. That's
Ah.
intense. Really speaks to that lifelong commitment idea.
Exactly. It's all about that deep brotherhood, that bond they emphasize. At least that's the idea.
Okay. So we've got the origins, the structure, the symbols. Now we kind of have to get into the tougher side of things, the criminal allegations.
Yeah, this is where it gets complex and frankly pretty dark sometimes. The sources detail a lot of incidents across different states.
Let's maybe go state by state where there's significant activity mentioned, starting with Colorado, their home base.
Right. Colorado comes up a lot,
Mm.
especially concerning methamphetamine.
Distribution?
Yeah, both wholesale and retail, apparently. Sources mention connections to Mexican cartels for supply and even some local production up in Weld County.
And then moving it to other states, like North Dakota.
Right. And the timeline in Colorado goes way back. There was a big bar brawl in '72 in Colorado Springs.
Yeah.
Sons of Silence versus a couple of other groups.
The founder, Richardson, was involved in that.
He was one of 6 members charged with assault, yeah. And there were even allegations back then about, like, conspiracies to attack police. Heavy stuff.
And it continues through the decades.
Oh, yeah. Fatal shootings, like an accidental one in '82. Then a big FBI bust in '83 involving meth conspiracy charges against 6 members. They were apparently moving drugs from California to Denver.
And turf wars.
Definitely. A member was charged with murdering someone from the Diablos Lobos gang in Aurora in '83. Conflict with the Invaders MC in the mid-'80s led to another member being killed.
It seems like violence was just part of the environment.
It appears so, based on these reports.
Mm.
Another shooting in '93 at a bar in Colorado Springs, the bar manager was killed. The alleged shooter was acquitted of murder, but later got federal weapons charges and died in a shootout with BLM agents years later.
Man. And leadership wasn't immune to charges either.
Nope. The president, Leonard Ray Shipley, convicted of drug and weapons charges in '93. And then that huge federal bust in '99.
That was the one that caught the national president and VP.
Yeah, Reed and the VP, Stephen Crescent, were among 37 members arrested across Colorado. Drugs, guns, grenades, silencers. A major operation.
So Colorado clearly has a long and troubled history associated with the club.
No doubt about it. And it seems meth was often at the center of it.
Okay, let's shift states. What about Indiana?
Indiana is interesting because the first chapter there was apparently started by a former member of the Outlaws MC, Michael Righteous Mike Ramsey, back in the '70s.
Switching sides, that probably didn't go over well.
You guessed it. Sources point to a really violent conflict erupting between the Sons of Silence and the Outlaws in Indianapolis. Late '70s, early '80s, multiple murders linked to it.
Like who?
Well, the Outlaws' national VP, Thomas Satan Reeves, was shot and killed at their clubhouse in 1980. A Sons of Silence member, Stephen Crescent, the same guy who later became national VP, was allegedly involved.
Wow, and it wasn't just club members getting hurt.
Tragically, no. Women associated with members were also killed during this period. Lisa Reimer, girlfriend of an SOSMC member, shot dead. Linda Massengale Rice, girlfriend of a chapter president, stabbed to death, both in 1980.
That's awful. The violence just spilled over.
It seems so. And another Outlaws member killed in '81. Then there was a big attack in '91 where a group of outlaws were jumped at a swap meet in Indy.
So that rivalry was intense and long-lasting.
Very much so.
Mm.
And like in Colorado, the crime wasn't just historical. 2011, there was Operation Sawmill.
Another big bust.
Yeah, FBI investigation into a meth ring involving the Indy and Terre Haute chapters led to 12 convictions. One guy got life for organizing a kidnapping over a drug debt.
Still dealing meth then?
Appears to be a recurring theme. And even in 2014, there was a conflict reported with another club, the Iron Order, in Crawfordsville. Weapons involved. So tensions clearly persist.
Okay, let's head over to Iowa. What do the sources say there?
Iowa also shows a pattern stretching back. An enforcer named Ronald Bad Ron Gruber was sentenced for rape and assault in '77.
Bad Ron. Okay.
And then, while he was already in prison, he was charged with, and later pleaded guilty to, a murder that happened back in 1984.
So still involved in crime even while locked up.
That's what the record suggests. Disturbing.
Yeah.
Iowa also saw major law enforcement action in the mid-'90s.
Like the big Arikamo case.
Exactly. Racketeering, money laundering conspiracy, violence charges against 14 members or former members in Cedar Rapids between '94 and '96.
Did they get convictions?
12 convicted. A national VP got life in prison, partly because another member flipped and cooperated with the government.
Cooperation must be a huge blow to that code of silence.
Absolutely. And then again in 2001, 6 members from the Boone chapter arrested for trafficking cocaine, marijuana, meth, guns. The national treasurer was convicted then.
So hitting the leadership again.
Seems like a pattern. And even quite recently, 2021, an enforcer from the Northern Iowa chapter got sentenced.
For what?
Being a felon in possession of a firearm. He apparently confronted an off-duty cop about the cop's jacket patches. Police later found brass knuckles and guns at his place. Shows that potential for confrontation is still there.
Okay, what about Missouri?
Missouri highlights a different kind of alleged crime. Mid-2010s, the Kansas City chapter president, Milton Barbed Wire Wilson, and an associate pleaded guilty to transporting a minor across state lines for prostitution.
Human trafficking, that's grim.
Yeah, definitely a different flavor of serious crime.
Yeah.
Wilson got 10 years, and going back again, the founder, Bruce the Dude Richardson, was sentenced back in '84 in Missouri for hiring someone to abduct a doctor over a debt.
So even the founder wasn't clean.
According to that conviction, no. Shows alleged criminality right from the top, early on.
Let's look north. North Dakota, they have chapters there too.
Yeah, Bismarck, Fargo, Grand Forks, Minot. Quite coincidence.
And the activity there, let me guess, meth.
Bingo. Methamphetamine trafficking, often brought in from other states, like Colorado, and there's mention of them potentially using smaller local gangs to handle the street-level dealing.
Outsourcing the risk?
Could be part of the strategy. But North Dakota also links them to some incredibly serious violence. They were alleged to have ordered the 2013 murder of a rancher, Jack Siege.
Ordered a murder.
That was the allegation. A man named Ryan Stensaker was convicted for that murder. Then in 2015, an enforcer, though maybe not a full member, pleaded guilty to murdering Amanda Stachangst.
These are shocking incidents.
They really are. Deeply troubling. And then there was that fire in Fargo in 2019.
What's that about?
Reportedly connected to a feud with the Hells Angels. Suggests that even alliances can be unstable.
Right. Okay, quickly, South Dakota and Wyoming, anything specific stand out?
Fewer details in our sources for those states, but the pattern seems similar. South Dakota. A member shot an Outlaws member in Sturgis in '90 during a fight. Some SOSMC members got stabbed too.
More conflict with the Outlaws.
Yep. And in '97, 7 members stopped near Sturgis, found with drugs and loaded guns. Possession with intent charges.
In Wyoming?
2017, 3 members pleaded guilty after beating and robbing a member of a rival club, the Bad 7 MC, in Rock Springs.
So violence, drugs, weapons.
Yeah.
It seems consistent across their areas.
Based on these documented incidents, yes. And you have to assume there's more that doesn't make the official reports.
Good point. So we've mentioned rivals like the Outlaws. What about allies?
The sources generally point to alliances with the Hells Angels, despite that Fargo incident maybe, and also the Iron Horseman MC.
So it's this complex web of friendships and rivalries.
Exactly. Shifting alliances, long-standing feuds, it really shapes the whole outlaw biker world. Who you can trust, who you fight, where you can operate.
Okay, so let's try to wrap this up. We've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
What are the main takeaways from this deep dive into the Sons of Silence?
Well, they started small in Colorado in the mid-'60s, Navy vet founder, and grew into this significant international club. Germany, multiple U.S. states.
Right. Strong sense of internal loyalty, you know, the motto, until death separates us, the patches.
Definitely that emphasis on brotherhood.
Yeah.
But you absolutely cannot ignore the other side, the extensive history of alleged criminal activity.
Yeah, that's undeniable from the sources. Methamphetamine seems to be a major recurring theme.
Huge. Drug trafficking, weapons offenses, and serious violence assaults, turf wars, even alleged involvement in murders, and numerous large-scale law enforcement busts targeting them over decades.
And their place in the wider biker world is defined by those alliances, like with Hell's Angels, and especially that bitter rivalry with the Outlaws.
Yeah, all those elements together give you a picture of the Sons of Silence.
So a final thought for you, our listener, to maybe chew on after this.
Given this long history, their international reach, and this persistent pattern of alleged crime despite law enforcement efforts, what does the continued existence and activity of a group like the Sons of Silence tell us?
Yeah, what does it suggest about the challenges of tackling organized crime when it operates in these kinds of, well, somewhat decentralized networks?
And how might groups like this continue to evolve and impact communities, both here in the U.S. and, internationally?
Something to think about. That's all the time we have for this deep dive.
Thanks for joining us.